Okay, so imagine realizing that the exact engineering principles keeping a 40-story office building from just collapsing,
Yeah.
that those are the exact same principles that keep a human life from collapse.
Right. Yeah. It's a pretty wild concept.
I mean, we're so used to hustle culture, waking up at 4 a.m. to crush it, all that stuff. But what we're looking at today is about treating your life like a literal machine that requires, like, precise mathematical maintenance.
Exactly. No motivational posters required.
Yeah, exactly. So today, for our deep dive, we are unpacking this incredibly unique personal philosophy. It's called the Cangyan Systems Model, or CYSM. And the sources we have for this are, well, they're entirely unconventional.
They really are.
We've got this massive stack of materials. We're talking technical white papers, deeply personal blog posts, dietary spreadsheets, Facebook work histories, and even these updates from XHS, the little Red Book platform.
Yeah, it's quite the archive.
And it all belongs to this one Singaporean man named Lin Cangyan.
And what stands out immediately about Lin is that he isn't, a Silicon Valley tech billionaire or some health guru trying to sell you a masterclass.
Right, he's not an influencer.
Far from it. He is an Institute of Technical Education graduate. He actually spent 40 years working as an ordinary engineering technician.
Wow, 40 years.
Yeah. He spent his days maintaining electrical systems, testing equipment, and managing building infrastructure. And eventually, that mechanical reality, it fundamentally altered how he viewed his own existence.
I mean, makes sense. If you spend 40 years looking at wires and load balances.
Exactly. He stopped looking at life as this sort of poetic narrative or a journey, and he just started looking at it as a closed-loop engineering project.
Which is fascinating. And honestly, for you listening, if you've ever felt completely exhausted trying to optimize your life, trying to get the promotion, the perfect body, the side hustle, Lynn's approach offers this radical alternative.
It really does.
What if the goal isn't to hit the highest peak, but just to build a foundation so unshakable that failure becomes, like, mathematically impossible?
Yeah, to understand how he actually does this, we have to look at the blueprint running his entire operation.
The core logic?
Right. In systems engineering, the primary objective is never to chase short-term peak performance. I mean, a building isn't designed to be successful, it's designed to endure.
It just needs to not fall down.
Exactly. And Lin applies this directly to human life. His foundational thesis is that life doesn't fail suddenly, it fails by accumulation.
Ah, okay.
Therefore, the entire goal of living is just to prevent micro-failures from compounding over time.
And he actually formalizes this into an equation, right? Like an actual math formula.
He does. He states that certainty is a function of single strength and processing time.
Okay, let's break the mechanics of that down, because when I first read that, I was a little lost.
Sure. So a signal is basically a structural choice in your environment. It could be a sustainable career path, a reliable financial habit, or a rigid biological routine.
Okay.
A problem is most people are constantly switching their signals.
Okay.
Trying a new diet, chasing a new investment trend.
Right, jumping from one thing to the next.
Yeah, but if you identify a stable signal and apply massive processing time to it, meaning you stick with it relentlessly for decades, a stable outcome isn't just likely. It is a mathematical certainty.
That brings up that story in his logs from 1991 that visualizes this perfectly.
Oh yeah, the photo.
Yeah. So Lin was 24 years old, working at NEC Semiconductors, and during a company trip to Malacca in Malaysia, a colleague snaps a photo of him standing in front of this historical structure known as the credit beat, or Shikian Men.
Right.
And in local lore, this gate symbolizes the concept of taking something in advance and paying the toll later. Buying on credit, basically.
And the wild thing is, decades later, while he was organizing his retirement photos, he looks at that image and realizes it was an absolute prophecy.
Wow.
By standing at the credit gate, he was looking at his own future. Because he was about to spend the next 25 years doing exactly that. Trading his physical labor and his youth in advance, enduring the daily friction of a job to slowly buy back his future freedom.
He found his signal, and he processed it over thousands of days.
Exactly.
But wait, let me push back on this a bit. Because preventing failures, avoiding a game over screen, doesn't that make life incredibly dull?
How do you mean?
Well, you're playing entirely on defense. Where's the high score? Where's the joy in just trying not to crash?
Yeah, it totally looks like defense from the outside. But Lin views it as the ultimate offense. He calls the end goal of this system exemption power.
Exemption power? That sounds like a superpower.
It basically is.
Yeah.
It essentially means achieving complete autonomy from external systems. If your life is built on compounding stability, you eventually reach this state where you don't need to beg an employer for a paycheck.
Yeah.
And you don't need a hospital for emergency medical interventions.
You're just totally self-sufficient.
Right. You are exempt from the panic of normal human existence. And in that state, time completely changes its character.
How so?
It stops being a deadline you are racing against, and it becomes a powerful amplifier of the stability you've already built.
Oh, I like that. You essentially buy diplomatic immunity from the rat race.
Exactly.
But to get exemption power, you have to actually be alive, right? Your hardware has to stay online. And Lin's biological hardware operates under some pretty severe, non-negotiable constraints.
Yeah, this is arguably the most vulnerable point of the entire CYSM framework.
Yeah.
Lin is actively managing schizophrenia.
Which is huge.
It is. And it requires a very strict dosage of 1 milligram of risperidone every single night.
Right.
In his own documentation, he notes 2 separate admissions to the Institute of Mental Health in Singapore in 2006 and 2013. So he knows the exact consequence of a biological system failure.
He writes down this brutal equation in his notes. Unauthorized medication discontinuation equals system collapse.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it.
Not at all. And you have to add to that an acute glaucoma attack he suffered in 2021. He woke up with blurred vision and vomiting, requiring emergency intervention, cataract surgery, and an intraocular lens implant.
Wow.
Yeah. Now he takes Zalatan eye drops nightly. So he can't work night shifts because of his medication schedule, and he can't even drink coffee because caffeine spikes his intraocular pressure.
Which is tough. But when your physical constraints are that tight, health is no longer like a vanity project. You aren't going to the gym to look good. Health is critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Lin writes quite bluntly about this. He says the primary goal is not to live better, but not to be locked away by the system.
That's a heavy line, not to be locked away by the system. So to ensure his hardware never crashes again, he structures his diet around this concept he calls low ages.
Advanced glycation end products, right.
Exactly. Basically, when you fry or grill food at high temperatures, the proteins and sugars violently bind together. And in a biological system, those resulting compounds act like microscopic rust.
Gross.
Yeah.
Great analogy.
Right. They slowly stiffen your blood vessels and degrade your cellular function over decades. So, by exclusively boiling and steaming his food, he is literally preventing his internal infrastructure from rusting.
And that engineering logic, it dictates his exact daily intake. 6 days a week, he consumes a highly specific pumpkin date banana soy milk oatmeal porridge.
And the preparation process reads like a literal industrial manufacturing manual.
It's so intense. He uses tap water, rolled oats, rye flakes, onion, and cubed pumpkin. He steams the pumpkin and boils the oats, but he absolutely refuses to add the final ingredients while the water is boiling.
Right, because high heat destroys the molecular structure of the remaining inputs.
Exactly.
He waits until the mixture cools to exactly 50 or 60 degrees Celsius. Only then does he add pure soy milk powder, flaxseed powder, and extra virgin olive oil.
And the reason why is so fascinating.
Yeah. He treats the soy protein specifically as an emulsifier. So in chemistry, an emulsifier forces oil and water to mix. By introducing the soy protein into the cooling oats and olive oil, he is wrapping the fat molecules into tiny, stable particles.
Which does what exactly? For his body.
It creates the slow digesting emulsion that prevents any sudden spikes or volatility in his blood sugar. He is actively dampening the volatility of his own digestion.
He's engineering his metabolism.
Exactly.
He even built a dashboard to monitor his own brain's volatility, which I found mind-blowing. He utilizes something called the Yamamoto still image. It's an optical illusion created by a Japanese psychiatry professor.
Oh, I have actually tried this. It is a completely static image of geometric patterns, but depending on how stressed your brain is, it appears to be moving.
Right. Lin uses it as a daily calibration tool for his mental state.
That's so smart.
If the image appears perfectly still, his biological system is stable. If it moves slowly, he acknowledges he's operating at his managed baseline of, slight tension. But if the patterns spin rapidly, it acts as an early warning alarm. It signals excessive stress, prompting him to immediately power down his activities before a systemic mental health event occurs.
It is brilliant, but if we look back at the dietary side, relying on one exact recipe 6 days a week feels incredibly fragile.
How so?
Well, if the grocery store runs out of rolled oats or a specific type of pumpkin, does his entire biological system crash? It seems like a single point of failure.
But Lin recognized that exact vulnerability. An overly rigid system shatters under pressure. So to counter this, he employs a strategy he calls robustness through diversity.
Okay.
He actively rotates his ingredients. If it's mango or cherry season, the banana gets swapped out. He alternates between yellow and purple onions to introduce different phytonutrients. He swaps soy milk powder for tofu.
So he is artificially introducing variants into his routine.
Precisely. And the way he conceptualizes this is what's really fascinating. He explicitly models this dietary rotation on data augmentation in artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow. Wait, how does that work?
Well, when you train a large language model or an AI on a data set, if that data is too uniform, the AI becomes brittle.
It only knows that one thing.
Right. It overfits the data, meaning it can only handle exact replicas of what it's seen before. So to make an AI robust, software engineers slightly alter the training data. They rotate the images, they introduce a little background noise.
Okay, yeah.
This forces the algorithm to learn the underlying patterns rather than just memorizing the exact inputs.
That is incredible. So by constantly rotating small variables in his meals, Lin is treating his gut microbiome and his immune system like a machine learning model.
Exactly.
He is forcing his biology to adapt to minor shocks so it becomes resilient to major ones.
And we actually have documented proof that this works for him.
Really?
Yeah. In 2016, the management at his building provided leftover catering to the tenants. Several people who ate it contracted severe food poisoning. But Lin ate the exact same food. And his system, which was fortified by daily doses of soluble fiber and this highly diverse augmented gut microbiome, it completely absorbed the shock. He experienced zero symptoms.
Wow. Okay, so the biological hardware is secured, but there is a massive vulnerability in this entire setup.
Capital.
Yes, capital. To buy the oats, the medication, the roof over his head, he needs money. And for most of us, capital requires selling our time to an employer. But if your ultimate goal is exemption power total autonomy, relying on a boss who can fire you at any moment is a catastrophic structural flaw.
Which actually became a reality for Lin.
Oh, that's right. In March of 2024, his employment was terminated.
Yeah. His nightly medication schedule meant he could no longer fulfill the shift work requirements of his job. And I mean, for the average 58-year-old, losing your primary source of income due to medical constraints, that's a full-blown crisis.
Absolute panic.
But Lin didn't panic because he had spent decades engineering his way out of needing a paycheck. He was actually ready to officially retire 7 years ahead of schedule.
And to understand how he did that, we really have to look at how he views money. Because he doesn't view capital as wealth. It isn't for buying status or luxury or a nicer car. Capital is strictly a system buffer.
Think of shock absorber on a car.
Right.
Its only purpose is to take the violent kinetic energy from a pothole and dissipate it so the chassis doesn't crack. That is exactly what money does for Lin. And to build this buffer, he made some highly calculated moves.
Like what?
Well, he entirely closed his Central Provident Fund accounts, which is Singapore's mandatory Social Security savings, and he just withdrew his capital.
He shifted entirely to what he calls a CDP dividend portfolio, and it's heavily reliant on real estate investment trusts, or REITs. He holds positions in Sassuri, Mapletree Pan Asia, and Frasers.
And the logic here is crucial to understand. He isn't buying volatile tech stocks hoping they double in price, because growth stocks require you to time the market. You have to know when to sell.
Right, and market timing introduces volatility. You're guessing.
Exactly. REITs, on the other hand, operate a lot like infrastructure utilities. They own physical buildings, they collect rent, and they distribute that cash directly to shareholders.
It is a slow, steady, highly predictable stream of capital. Lin actually uses a complex mathematical formula to track his actual estimated principal against a benchmark index fund.
Yeah, he's measuring his true yield. He aims for a very specific, highly reliable, annualized certainty yield of 5.61%.
5.61%, very precise.
Always the engineer.
And he pairs this income stream with an extremely lean lifestyle. He caps his monthly expenses at just 667 Singapore dollars.
Living on $667 a month in Singapore requires massive systemic efficiency. It's incredibly difficult. But it ties back to a profound philosophical distinction that Lin makes. He categorizes money as an infinite game.
Meaning there's no end to it.
Right. You can always earn more, invest more, or borrow more. There's absolutely no mathematical ceiling to wealth.
But human time is a strictly finite game.
Yes. And chasing an infinite resource using a finite resource is a thermodynamic trap. You will eventually run out of time and you will never actually win the game of money.
Wow, that is perfectly stated. By artificially capping his needs and structuring a diverse portfolio of moderate dividends where, by the way, no single asset exceeds 10% of his total holdings, Lin officially opted out.
He intentionally traded the possibility of maximum financial wealth for the guarantee of maximum survival.
He used a finite amount of money to buy an infinite amount of personal freedom. That is just incredible. And, we've seen this engineering logic applied to his breakfast, and we've seen it applied to his retirement portfolio. But in his white papers, he actually scales this framework up to analyze global geopolitics.
Yeah, specifically the tensions between China and the United States.
Right. And before we explore his macro analysis, it is really important to clarify how we are approaching this. So you listening, we are not taking a political stance here at all. We are not evaluating who has the moral high ground or validating the policies of either nation.
No, we're strictly observing how Lin Cangyan applies his cold, impartial engineering framework to macroeconomic systems.
Exactly. So Lin analyzes global superpowers through the exact same lens he uses to analyze electrical grids. He categorizes China as a production-oriented system.
Right. Economically, it's built to generate massive industrial surplus. It relies heavily on domestic savings, and its operations are driven by long-term centralized planning.
Conversely, he categorizes the United States as a consumption and financial system. It generates structural deficits by consuming more than it produces. It relies on the dominance of the dollar as a reserve currency, and its operational logic is driven by short-term, cyclical electoral periods.
And because the fundamental physics of these two systems are diametrically opposed, friction is just inevitable.
Think of it like atmospheric pressure. China's system produces more than it consumes, which creates this immense economic pressure pushing outward into the globe. The U.S. system consumes vastly more than it produces, operating like a massive economic vacuum pulling resources inward.
So when a high-pressure system constantly collides with a vacuum, you don't get a peaceful breeze.
No.
You get a perpetual tornado. The friction isn't caused by a single politician making a bad policy choice. It's just basic thermodynamics.
It's like grinding gears in a machine. Zero tension between the two is mathematically impossible unless one of the systems completely rewrites its own core physics.
And what makes Lin's framework so practical is his response to this reality. He doesn't try to predict the outcome of global trade wars.
He doesn't panic.
Right. He doesn't protest, and he doesn't panic. He simply recognizes the permanent structural instability and engages in personal adaptation.
He adjusts his own shock absorbers.
That's it. He notes in his logs that he gradually reduced his investment exposure to assets that are heavily reliant on the U.S. dollar system. He simply aligns his personal buffer to safely weather the friction generated by the larger macro systems.
The gears of the global economy might be grinding, but his internal machinery remains perfectly lubricated.
It really is a masterclass in controlling what you can control. Lin Cangyan didn't just build a coping mechanism. He built a fully open-source operating system for human life.
And the evolution of his name in his own writings perfectly encapsulates this whole journey.
Yeah, he actually explains that the Kang in his name represents heavy accumulation.
Like storing up mass.
Exactly. It's the weight of his 40 years of practical engineering experience, extracting certainty and stability from an unpredictable world.
And the yan translates to a swallow, or a bird, which represents lightness, true control. The ability to fly effortlessly into his kitchen, manage his own meals, and live completely untethered from societal expectations.
He summarizes his entire existence in one really profound sentence. He says, "I am not making money. I am using an algorithm to redeem my freedom."
Redeem my freedom? That is, wow, we spend so much of our energy reacting to sudden crises, don't we? A health scare, a market crash, a layoff.
Always playing catch up.
Right, we scramble to put out the fire, and then we just wait for the next one. But what if we shifted our perspective to proactive system design?
I mean, if you treat your life as an interconnected system, the maintenance you perform today dictates the stability you experience a decade from now.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. In the engineering of your own life, remember Lin's core equation. Time is the ultimate amplifier.
Look at your daily habits, your biological constraints, and your financial buffer.
Right, for you listening, if time is simply a mechanism that amplifies whatever structure you have built, what exactly is your life system amplifying right now? Are you slowly compounding resilience and exemption power? Or are you just quietly accumulating hidden failures?